Hello listeners, I'm Patricia Rossi, Vice President of Engagement for AMS. Thank you for joining us for another episode of AMS Illuminations. To help us reach more listeners, give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform or share AMS Illuminations on social media. For more information about the podcast and today's guest, visit ams-web.org/illuminations. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome back, listeners. Dana, I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation that we began in our last episode of AMS Illuminations. For listeners, if you haven't listened to that first episode of my conversation with Dana yet, I recommend that you go back and do that before listening to this episode. Obviously, you have this interest in AI, and you've talked about, even in industry, how the expectation for AI skills is something that employers are going to be looking for. I was just curious, do you use AI in your own integration of kind of your research and teaching and linking it to practice?
Well, I definitely use it in my courses because I teach our marketing research and analytics courses and some of our other quantitative courses here, data-driven marketing decisions. And so I definitely use it in my courses. And what I mostly use is from the textbook that we help develop. So we have a lot of use cases there. We try to link it and make it applicable to business. Each chapter has a use case at the end, and we try to link that, make that connection for students. They understand the foundation of the analytics or some of the tools and why to use them, but they also understand the value of that in practice. And so that is one area that I use. In terms of Gen AI, we're implementing a lot of this. And I say we, me and some of my colleagues in the department are implementing this into our classroom for the fall semester. So we're wanting to introduce our students to some really important areas and what we're hearing from industry in terms of Gen AI. And I mean, I could give you some examples now, but this could obviously evolve over just the next couple of months, just because of some of the advancements that we've seen even on the more recently. But I think some of the things that we want to teach them is asking the right questions. So this is something we actually talk a little bit about in the marketing analytics textbook, but this is kind of a reality of life, like learn to ask the right questions. And I think using generative AI, they can kind of think, we need to help them learn to ask the right questions to get the most effective response. And the other thing is understanding that Gen AI isn't perfect and that it does hallucinate. And so I think that that's another thing that I kind of want to trial out. I haven't come up with something just yet, but I want to trial something out and kind of catch them and kind of teach them, right? We learn so much by making mistakes, I think. And so I want them to be able to make a mistake and kind of learn from that. And I want to create something for our class where they can make a mistake, but we can talk about it and they can learn from it. So
I love how you talk about it can hallucinate. I haven't heard that term, but that's a really good way to summarize some of what you get back from generative AI. Now, you have already talked some about ways that you try to stay up to date with industry developments, but I would love for you to talk a little about how you maintain ties with industry while you're also, very heavily involved in academia. How do you manage this very delicate balance? And let me just point out for those who are listening to this, Dana is also the Secretary Treasurer and incoming VP of Programs for the Academy of Marketing Science. She's served as Proceedings Editor for Society for Marketing Advances. She's Program Chair President-elect and is now the President for 2024 for Society for Marketing Advances. She's an Associate Editor for the Journal of Marketing Theory and Practice, serves on the editorial review boards for the Journal of Marketing Education and Journal of Business Research. I mean, I'm exhausted just listing all of those things, and you're actually managing these things. So you're doing all of that, very heavily involved with academia. How do you manage the balance between academia and staying connected with industry?
All of us are involved in some kind of service opportunities. And I think going back to some of the earlier conversation around just learning what we find is valuable and what we want to do to prioritize our time, I think is very critical in this area. For us, I do serve as department chair and MBA director. That is something that I have to balance as well, I guess, on top of service opportunities. Staying connected with service and also with industry really allows me to continuously meet new people. And that information is really critical in some of the other work that I do. We have faculty advisory boards and dean's executive councils. We're all involved in part of the conversations with these groups. So We also proactive in things like professional development and meeting others. And I think that these are areas where we can learn from each other and integrate, I think, some of what they're talking about and some of their feedback into what we're doing in our classrooms and in our research.
All right, I appreciate those responses. And now I'm really going to put you on the spot because we want to get personal. I mean, that's why we're here. Let's be honest. So we've talked some about AI. We've talked some about your research, staying connected with industry. But what about your own opinions of AI and the future of how it's going to impact academic jobs? How is the role of professor going to be affected by AI? And what does it look like in terms of jobs for data analysts? Obviously, it's an up and coming, it's here to stay. It's a topic that is something you've given a lot of attention to. What do you see as the future of AI and its impact on what we do?
That's a good question. I think it's a question that not only we're asking as academics, but let's face it, probably most people in industry are asking about their roles as well. I think this is a tool, at least right now, and probably for the foreseeable future, that I see as augmenting our work. I don't see it as a replacement for us. And I don't know if you recall, but probably back about 14 years ago or so, the university started having conversations about whether or not we were relevant or whether or not students could pursue badges instead of college degrees. And this was a big conversation at our institution as well. It's actually when we sort of started talking about providing online course options at the time. It was sort of in the early stages of having conversations around online courses. And I think there was initially we were all frightened about the possibility of us no longer being valued or even needed. And I think that we kind of saw that play out over time, and it didn't really end like we had been told it might end. And so we're kind of in a similar situation. I think we're looking at augmentation. I don't think we're looking at replacement.
So you're saying my job is safe for now? I'm okay?
So you asked me about my opinion, and that's my opinion. That's definitely my opinion.
All right. Kind of taking a slightly different direction, but still personal, very personal. We're really trying to get to know you. Could you share any research project of yours that has really made an impact in industry circles that you're aware of? And if so, how did you bridge the gap between academia and industry with that research? And what's your approach to pitching research ideas to industry partners?
So there are a couple of projects, I guess, that we've done more recently that I could see being used in industry. The couple of projects that come to mind, the first one is published in the Journal of Business Research in 2019. I had the pleasure of working with O.C. and Linda Farrell and Joe Hare on a project related to business ethics, corporate social responsibility, and brand attitudes. And at the time, we kind of saw quite a few lapses in corporate social responsibility. And so this was something that we sort of started having conversations around based upon some of what we were seeing. And we discovered that customers do differentiate between corporate social responsibility and business ethics as it relates to brand attitudes. And although corporate social responsibility attitudes remain important, customers actually value business ethics as a critical behavior in their perceptions of brand attitudes. And what we really took away from that, at least in terms of companies, that firms should recognize the need to determine behaviors that their consumers consider positive business ethics and positive corporate social responsibility. But these risk areas are different for each firm, and they really require an audit to determine positive behavior and risk areas to monitor and take corrective actions for when the behavior is seen as questionable by the customer. And so development of additional corporate ethics and compliance programs should really be a top priority. And the benefits of ethical behavior should be linked to brand attitude and then financial value. CSR and business ethics should be integrated with corporate strategy. And we might think about this as common sense, but a lot of times there's not that linkage between business ethics and corporate social responsibility with corporate strategy. Sometimes it happens in sort of a siloed manner. We have some other projects underway that are related to AI and ethics. And one was recently accepted by the Academy Marketing Science Review, which I could see as serving as a foundation for conversations around the topic of AI and ethics. And we're seeing a little bit more of this in marketing research, but not a lot at this point. And we present a theory-based decision framework to incorporate ethical decisions or considerations into AI applications. And so what we did is we built off of the modification of the Hunt Vitale ethical decision model, and we present a way for industry to ground AI ethics in the HV model. And it requires collaboration with all participants that are developing as well as using AI systems in a company.
So it sounds like those projects that you just mentioned kind of inherently address issues that are relevant for practitioners. I'm curious, from your own perspective, are there any challenges in terms of getting practitioners to look at this research, to read this research, to utilize this research? And are there any steps that you've taken, either individually or with your co-authors, that kind of help promote your research to practitioners?
We have a lot of conversations with industry. And I think that in terms of challenges to get them to read something, it's not usually that challenging to get them to read something necessarily when we're having those interactions, but we've developed these relationships over time. So I think that if we're talking in general about marketers or those in industry seeking out academic journals, I'm not sure that that's going to be a harder sell, because I think there are a lot of other sort of shortened or more abbreviated articles that they tend to pursue that, help them stay abreast, I guess, of current information. I think before you asked about selling a research idea to industry partners. And so going back to that front end of selling a research idea to industry partners, I think this is similar to sales in general. And I think at a very high level, you need to confirm your research idea is something they need or might value. But you should then be prepared to communicate that value proposition and answer questions such as maybe the how and the timeline. But, think about it. It would be really embarrassing to walk into a meeting and discover the company has already explored these areas that you're pitching, and it's contained in some press release or annual report. So this could really reduce your credibility. And so think about it when you are approaching these industry partners. Preparation is key to approaching them. Consider involving your networking quarterly conversations around research projects. We do this here at ETSU in our department. Share what you're doing, but also listen to what they share as far as what their current challenges are and future opportunities. And I think that this can provide some collaboration where both parties benefit from your research.
Thanks for that insight. Unfortunately, we are approaching the end of our conversation. We're not quite there yet. I do have a few additional questions for you. And so to circle back to the issue of AI and its impact on industry, its impact on academia, have you perceived a difference in terms of acceptance of AI use and ethics related to AI in different industries? Clearly, it seems to be accepted already in practice, I think, more readily than it is in academia. But what about across different industries, or maybe even in different countries? Do you think the expectations to bridge industry and academia using AI would vary based on regions, industries, those types of considerations?
For sure. They would definitely vary based on industry or location. I think we've seen different regulations in place. The GDPR many years ago, we have more and more here regulations being examined in the United States around the area around the area of use of AI. I think that in terms of industries, let's just take the medical industry versus maybe some type of retailer. I think that the potential negative impact on society could be greater in medical instances versus trying to sell me some type of product. Now, it doesn't mean that retail stores or retail industry shouldn't consider the ethical implications, but if you're talking about differences or considerations, I think that, we're going to see some of that depending upon the industry. As I mentioned previously, the regulations, but the same goes in terms of countries, right? I think it was just this morning that I was reading, and this isn't related specifically to AI necessarily, but I was reading that there were some lapses in some promises that Google had made actually involving data collection. And some of that was around children's voices and the holding on of information of children's voices. And there were some other things listed there as well. We know that companies are concerned about this, or they're at least talking about their ethical practices. How are they implemented, or if they're implemented to the extent that maybe they're saying they're implemented, might be something else, right? I think that we are going to see differences in terms of industries, but also different countries.
Thanks for all of these insights. And we have reached that point now where we're approaching the end of our conversation. I am curious, and I think many of our listeners might also be curious, if you have any advice for scholars that are trying to make their research findings resonate with industry stakeholders. Any specific ideas to really sell these ideas? I know you mentioned, approaching it with a general sales mentality, but if there are some specific tactics that you think have worked for you or could potentially work, I think listeners would love to hear that insight.
I would say just share your ideas and discuss related areas of importance with other people. Sometimes approaching industry contacts prior to starting a project is really going to yield important information that you might not have considered. And so this approach is going to likely lead to valuable insights that can just enhance your research and ensure your project aligns with industry relevant implications. And so I'd say, don't be afraid to reach out to those contacts. Don't be afraid to connect with your research partners and connect with their networks as well. I think that talking to more people is only going to yield positive results.
I think those are great ideas. And I certainly appreciate the insights that you've shared. Obviously, a top of mind focus for AMS is bridging the gap. I think the insights you've shared are particularly interesting and relevant because of your interest and focus on AI. I hope that everyone listening is as open to incorporating AI into the classroom and finding new ways to incorporate it into research as well. Dana, thank you. Your insight has been invaluable. We appreciate your perspective. It's been a pleasure having you on AMS Illuminations today.
Thank you for having me today, Brad. I'm honored to be here.
For everyone listening, stay tuned for future episodes. Don't hesitate to drop us a line if you have a guest suggestion or even topics, ideas for the next seasons of AMS Illuminations. We appreciate you listening.
Be sure to subscribe to AMS Illuminations and don't miss out our episodes. If you have a question or topics you'd like to be up for discussion on AMS Illuminations, email ams-web@outlook.com. For more information about AMS and AMS Illuminations, visit ams-web.org.